Morning, everybody. Happy Monday. What is today? It's after the Super Bowl, so it's the 13th. Happy to be with you today. A little bit late getting out of here, getting this recording out today. That's okay. I was up, probably like you, up late watching the Super Bowl, and I have to say that it was one of my favorites. I was rooting for the Chiefs. I don't know about you. If you're rooting for the Eagles, that's fine. As a lot of people would say, just hope that both teams have fun. I've got a couple friends that are Eagles fans, so I know they were bummed. I got a couple friends that are that are Chiefs fans, and I know they were happy. So at the end of the day, I was telling Brandy last night, I was like, for some reason, I always get excited about the Super Bowl. I said it didn't matter when I was a Lions fan. Didn't matter if the Lions weren't in it. Didn't matter now that I'm a Vikings fan that the Vikings aren't in it. It always gets me excited. I don't know what it is. I think it's just the spirit of competition. I was a former athlete and just really enjoyed the game and and having some laughs and eating some pizza and just all the things that come with sports. So great game last night and excited for the week ahead. Hey, Pastor Jim's back this week, so that's fantastic. We're going to be looking forward to having him back and all the things that come with that. He'll be able to be with us and lead a couple Bible studies, preaching on Sunday, helping with St. Stephen on Wednesday, and all of the things. We're going to have a new podcast out just between him and I. Excuse me. That'll be dropping at the end of this week, and so that'll be good for the listeners to kind of hear his voice again. I do want to make a quick note about that. If you have not had a chance to go and listen to the Suffering Servants podcast, which I'll make sure I got a new camera, so I'm trying to make sure that my my balance is right. I'll put it right here, right above the window. The logo here, look for that Suffering Servants podcast. I got to sit down with a really, really good friend of mine named Pastor Gabe Casper. He's the pastor of one of our supporting congregations at University Lutheran Chapel in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So far, it's got a really, really good response. We sat down and talked about depression, anxiety, and I'm actually going to slide right here. I'm going to put a preview of what you could expect. So I'd really encourage you to go listen to it if you have had a chance to. This following clip is what you can expect.
The main thing, one, to what we talked about earlier, the main thing is I just want to sit in that with them, let them know that they're not alone, let them know that I am with them, let them know that they are loved by me and by their Father in heaven, and let them know like there's hope, like that. And it feels kind of trite and like okay, but like that's what you need is like there's hope. Like you don't always have to stay in the hole. Like the dark shadow in the corner is not going to always be coming for you every morning. Like this isn't the end of the story. Like it's just not. And so there is hope for healing. And that there just is like, and you're not always going to be here. And to keep fighting for another day, to keep fighting to live into that hope. That would be kind of my main message.
Oh yeah, that's what we're doing. I love that part where he gives his message, kind of what his message would be to someone who is struggling with anxiety and depression. That's me. That's very well could be you. And like I said, I've had a lot of really good feedback so far from that, and excited to see the next couple guests that we're going to have on. I'm not going to tell you all the guests, but I think you're really going to enjoy seeing who we have on the show and talking through the various struggles. And I am certain that all of you will be able to relate to multiple of the guests as they share their suffering and their joy in Christ Jesus. So want to get to the text from yesterday. So yesterday was a interesting text. It's one of those texts where after you read it, it's kind of like when you read the gospel of or the story in one of the gospels about the beheading of John the Baptist, and it ends, this is the gospel of the Lord, and you're like, I don't know if that was gospel, because yesterday's text was from Matthew chapter 5, kind of the back part of Matthew chapter 5, getting near the end of the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus is talking about the various laws, and he's got a very direct purpose for giving us these laws. He talks about adultery, he talks about murder, he talks about oaths, he talks about divorce, he talks about all of these different things. And then essentially the reason for doing that is to get us back to the law and to understand that we are not yes, we are free from the law, but we still abide by the law. Meaning meaning that the law no longer condemns us, to be sure. The law does not save us, but the law is good. The law is good. We call that the third use of the law in the Christian church. So the law dictates and shows us how we are to live as disciples of Jesus. And so those are very good things. And when Jesus is speaking to these disciples and to the people that are other people that are listening on the mountain, and he says, "You have heard, you shall not murder. But I tell you that if you so much as look at your brother with hatred in your heart, then you have already broken this commandment. You've already killed him." He says the same thing about adultery. You heard it said that you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you, if you look at a woman or a man lustfully in your heart, you have already committed adultery. And so what he's doing here, I brought up the eighth commandment yesterday. You have heard, you shall not bear false witness. But I tell you, if you don't speak well or defend your neighbor, you have already broken this commandment, right? And so what he's doing here is to say, you know what, we have a culture that likes to try to get off on technicalities, that likes to say, well, you know what, I've never actually killed someone. I can sit on this video cast right now and tell you, listener, you viewer, I have never once killed somebody with my hands, with a weapon or anything like that. I've never once killed somebody. So according to the law, I can say I have kept that commandment perfectly. But here's the thing. I haven't kept that commandment perfectly because how many times have I looked at someone and said, I really don't like that person, or I really wish that person would go fall off a cliff, or I really wish that this person would do this, or I just really can't stand that person. I've got all these thoughts about this person, right? Maybe I've never intentionally made up a lie about somebody to ruin their reputation, but I got to tell you, how many times have I gone to someone and said, hey, I got some juicy gossip for you. You would never believe what this person did. And maybe it's true, but my only purpose in sharing that news with someone is simply to ruin their reputation too. And so that's falling in line with breaking that commandment. And so what Jesus is doing with this is trying to say, stop thinking about the don'ts of the commandments and think about the do's of the commandments. Pastor Hill and I talk about this all the time at Family of God. When you look at Luther's Small Catechism, and you look at Luther's explanation for these commandments, there's always a set of do's and there's a set of don'ts. So, for instance, the eighth commandment, we just talked about the eighth commandment. It says, thou shalt not bear false witness, or you shall not lie. So it says something along the lines of, I don't have it right in front of me, and it's been a minute since I've had to recite it verbatim, but it's something along the lines of, we should fear and love God so that we do not tell lies, slander, and speak evil of our neighbor. Right? It seems pretty straightforward. That's the hold on, I gotta pause this. Excuse me, I don't remember where I was. Brandy just called me. That's why you had the little, transition thing. Brandy called me with a very important question, and I completely lost my spot. So forgive me, friends, on a Monday. My goodness. I really had to take that call, and now I don't remember where I was. That's all right. So the point being is that Jesus is telling us these commandments to say, hey, stop looking. Oh, I remember where we're at. So Martin Luther has the do's and the don'ts, right? So what we have a culture of doing is we have a culture of trying to figure out, well, I technically can keep the law. So I mentioned that, I don't. Is this where I was? I'm spending way too much time trying to figure this out. But anyway, so let's put this into practice, right? So we got Luther's do's and don'ts, right? And we have a culture that wants to try to find loopholes. Well, technically, I can keep this law. Technically, I did this. Well, I didn't really, do this, so I'm getting off on a technicality, right? And so when you think about the Good Samaritan, because this is the story that I used yesterday at both Family of God and St. Stephen, you think about the Good Samaritan, and you look at, if you recall on the story, it's the story of the Jewish man who's going from Jericho to Jerusalem, or going from Jerusalem to Jericho, and I think it's Jericho back to Jerusalem. And so he's stripped and left for dead by robbers, right? And then you got two priests, or a priest and a Levite, that come by, and they just kind of sidestep him, go on the other side. The Greek language actually suggests that one of them literally turns around and goes the other way. But so technically speaking, right, according to law, right, they didn't touch him, they didn't become unclean, they're not the ones that hurt him, they didn't harm him, right? So they kept the part of the commandment that says you shall not hurt or harm your neighbor in any bodily form. But what didn't they do? They didn't help and support him in every bodily need, which is the do of this commandment. So they're guilty of breaking this commandment. Same thing with this with the Samaritan, right? He sees him, he keeps this commandment because he sees him and he helps him. He didn't beat him up, he didn't almost kill him, but he goes and helps him in his bodily needs. And so you've got that. So that's that's keeping that fifth commandment. That's what Jesus is telling us about these commandments. Think about real life, right? One of my favorite things, and actually it's not my favorite thing, it's one of the most irritating things that I hear from people in suburban congregations in particular, when you hear I got gossip, right? And they say, well, Pastor, I got to tell you something. Tyler, I got to tell you something. Pastor Jim, I got to tell you something. Or whatever, whoever, you hear these side conversations. And you hear these people being so mean to one another or about one another, talking behind other people's backs. And you bring it up and you're like, I don't really know if you should be saying that. And they'll say, well, that's not gossip because it's true. That's not gossip because it's true. What I'm saying is not lies. I'm not spreading lies. I'm telling the truth. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not speaking. You're not lifting your brother or your sister up. You're not showing them grace. You're not showing them love. You're not putting the best spin on things, which is what Luther talks about in the Catechism about the eighth commandment. And that's what Jesus is trying to get us to remember, is that there's not just don'ts. These commandments are not just thou shalt not do this. Because if we just went by those commands, yeah, we'd be pretty good. But here's the thing. We might say, well, you know what? I've technically kept the fifth commandment, technically kept the sixth commandment. I've technically kept I've never lied. I've never done this. I've always honored my mother and father. I've never used the Lord's name in vain. I've never coveted. I've never been jealous, which is all crap, by the way, but you may be thinking that. And then you get to the very first commandment. Thou shalt not have any other gods before my face. And you go, okay, haven't done that. Right? I have not built, a golden calf, right, and worship it in my backyard. I don't, take these foreign gods and bring them to the altar of Yahweh, right, like in the Old Testament, what some of these Old Testament folks would do. But here's the thing: when you I'm not gonna call out my dad because he went to church and played golf yesterday, which was awesome. He took advantage of the beautiful weather, but he did not neglect to go to church. I know plenty of people that on a day like yesterday would have neglected to go to church and go to the golf course instead. Neglected to go to church, but go and fish. Neglected to go to church, but go and hunt. Neglected to go to church, but go to a football game or whatever, right? Neglected to go to church, but take their kids to soccer. Neglected to go to church, but take their kids to hockey practice. And neglected to go to church, but and did all these things, put them all in place of worshiping God. And when you do that, you've made something else your God. You've put your faith and your trust into something else, and you've placed that above God. And so you've broken the first commandment. Every single person that's watching this video cast has broken these commandments. Even if you've kept the don'ts perfectly, you've broken them in ways you've not even imagined. And so what Jesus is doing with this text is he's trying to get us to realize that we don't get off on any technicalities. And you can't keep the law. Paul has this great line in Philippians chapter 3 where he talks about his own righteousness. He talks about how according to the law, which is how we like to operate, even though we've been set free from the law, we still like to operate from the law. He says, I was perfect. I was a Pharisee of Pharisees, he says. I was righteous. But you know what all that righteousness was? He calls it animal excrement. He calls it crap. Garbage, and those words aren't even strong enough. It's actually the word is skubala, which is a very strong. It's almost like the Greek cuss word for poop. So you can insert the word that you would like to in English there. But that's what he's calling his righteousness. He says it's garbage. It's useless, and that's how God views your righteousness too. He calls it filthy rags. He calls it tainted with dirt and filth and blood and grossness, right? That's what God looks at your righteousness as, because you can't keep the law perfectly. You just can't. So stop trying to keep the law perfectly, because as soon as you try to get in that mentality, that cultivates the fruits of the flesh, when our goal as Christians is to exhibit the fruits of the Spirit. But notice how it's the fruits of the Spirit. It's not the fruits of you. The fruits of the flesh, the fruits of you, are things like malice, slander, adultery, jealousy, strife, anger, jealousy, all those different things. But the fruits of the Spirit that are only cultivated by the Spirit working in you, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, patience, gentleness, goodness, self-control, all those things, those are fruits of the Spirit, God working in you and through you to keep these commandments. And so when Jesus gives us this, airs out this list of commandments, he wants us to see that we don't keep these, so that we will turn to the one who does keep these. Because Jesus keeps these laws perfectly. Jesus technically keeps these laws perfectly. Jesus technically does everything the right way. Jesus technically is the only righteous person that has ever walked the face of the earth. And Jesus technically, from every dot the I, every T, fulfilled all righteousness for you. And then he goes to the cross and dies for you. That's his reward for keeping the law perfectly for you. You kill him. I kill him. Because that's not what I want. I want to do it myself. I don't want someone else to do it. But Jesus goes and does it for you. He says, I know, my child, that you cannot keep this law, that you are so selfish, that you are so into yourself, and you are so incapable of keeping these laws. And I love you so much, and I want you to spend eternity with me, that I'm going to go and do it for you. And so believe and trust in me and in my righteousness, not on your own. And those words, the mouth that opens to give the commandments is the same mouth that opens on the cross that says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That looks to you and says, you are my son with whom I'm well pleased because of what my son has done. So remember that today. That's really what I want you to go into this week. Stop trying to please God with your piety. That's going to be my sermon this upcoming Sunday. Stop trying to please God with your piety. Stop trying to please God with the things that you do and impress him with all that. He's not interested in that. He's interested in what Jesus did for you. So rely wholeheartedly on what Christ did for you, keeping the law perfectly. And when we keep those laws, it's not because of us. It's because God has given us a spirit to keep those commandments and to exhibit those fruits of the Spirit for us, and draws other people using our witness into that relationship with him. So I pray that that's helpful for you. I pray that that's an encouragement to you. Have a great week, everyone. Lots of good things happening. We've got Bible study tonight, tomorrow, Wednesday, clinic on Thursday, NA and Bible trivia. Deacon John said that we had 30 people at Bible trivia on Friday. That was awesome. And worship on Sunday. So make sure you come out and see that. Come see Pastor Jim. Welcome him back to the fold. And again, look for that new episode. Pastor Hill and I will be on the podcast looking for that new episode of Suffering Servants dropping on Friday. But if you hadn't had a chance to go and check out the last one of Suffering and Depression, please go and do that. I think it'll be really helpful for you. It was for me. I got some good feedback on that. So have a great week. If you have prayer requests, comments, whatever, you can have them in the comments here on Facebook, or you can send us a message either on the Facebook page or on our email. Thank you all for your love and support as we continue to serve God together and bring his kingdom, have his kingdom come and be amongst us. So have a great week. Talk to you next time. If no one has told you yet, God loves you. So do we.